Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is the Saturday show where I will give you four quick notes from the the Thursday night game. I have a public service announcement to go over before we get into this, and of course we will go over the injury report of every team who has an injury report, especially players that are most relevant to fantasy football. There's a lot to get through. Let's get going. The public service announcement first. Just because someone was a love 'em or a fade 'em for me earlier in the week does not mean that I may not regret that decision later on in the week. It doesn't mean I'm going to change it. I can't really do that. But what happened in week 2 was that I limited myself from changing the rankings on, it ended up being like 2 players due to my status for them for the love 'ems and the fade 'ems. I believe it was Dameon Pierce and Raheem Mostert ended up having them butted up against each other. Dameon Pierce was a love 'em. Raheem Mostert was a fade 'em, and I really wanted to flip him, and I just didn't do it. It didn't feel right, but at the same time, it feels maybe even more wrong not to do it. So I will freely move my love 'ems, my fade 'ems throughout the week without any of that going forward. The main point here is to make sure that you check the updated rankings. If you're going off of my rankings from the videos come Saturday or Sunday morning, I stop updating those rankings about 2 hours prior to kickoff, but 1 hour prior to kickoff, I go live here on YouTube where you can come visit. You don't have to ask a start-sit question, but the rankings are all there for you to see, so you can also just come check that out and then just leave. You don't have to say anything. Just a heads up for my love 'ems and my fade 'ems this week. I was left wondering why in the heck I made Mike Williams a fade 'em against Minnesota. I don't know why I do this to myself sometimes. Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that fade 'em, but it is a fade 'em of mine. And some comments have been made that make me a little less unsure that the Eagles are going to give Swift their trust. That was a weird sentence. Basically, I'm pretty confident in the fact that Swift is going to be the first guy to get a chance to be the leader of this backfield with Kenny G coming back this week. At the very least, I believe that he's going to be the first one to get a crack to have the hot hand. Here's a comment from head coach Nick Sirianni earlier this week. This is 2 different parts of a larger quote talking about Swift. Nick Sirianni said, "If he's got the hot hand on Monday, we'll keep rolling with him. ... You're running the ball like that, give it to him 35 times. It's hard not to do that." Obviously, they saw the same thing that everybody else saw. Before we get to the injury reports, we got to talk about a few big things from the San Francisco versus New York Giants game. The 49ers are who we thought they were. There's really nothing to take away from this game, in my opinion. But 4 notes on the Giants. Number 1, the final box score felt a little deceiving. Stress the word little there. I think that there were some things to like in this game. At least there were in spurts, especially early on in the game. Mostly I liked some of what we saw on the defensive side of the ball more so than the offensive side of the ball, where that offensive line is a major concern. And that's going to bring us into this second note, which is starting off with the fact that Daniel Jones is droppable, I do think, because of that offensive line. But and because of the schedule this season. I don't think that it's like a great schedule, but he's not a must drop. He faced 2 of the best defenses in the NFL, maybe even the top 2 in these first 3 weeks. So the next 3 matchups for them are going to be Seattle, Miami, Buffalo. Make that what you want of it. Obviously, it's going to be tough to trust him going up against Seattle. Then if he doesn't have a big game, it would be tough to trust him. But I think there are some things to like about all of those matchups. So once again, I don't think that you have to drop them, but you could. Number 3, it may not have felt like Matt Breida dominated the running back snaps, but he did, despite the fact that he and Brightwell ended with the same amount of touches, targets, and I think receptions and rushes. The good thing for Matt Breida going forward, if Saquon Barkley does not come back next week or the week after that, is that Breida received almost all of the third down work, all of the 2-minute drill work, and the single rush that they have from the goal line, or at least I assume it was that rush, but maybe not. But he was, when they had goal line work, the one time that they did in this game, he was on the field. And number 4, Darren Waller. His snap share was intact this game. It was actually above season average. However, that's more convoluted because week 1's snap share was really low. Week 2's was really, really high, so it was somewhere in between. And he led this offense in targets. He's going to continue to be a top 5 tight end in target share after this week is all said and done. That's almost a guarantee. So don't forget that he had a good week 2 game. He is far from someone that you should be dropping at this point in time. Even if he's just another tight end, he is still going to be one of the best, if not the best, out of those, the big tight end group that you can not confidently rely on each week. Don't drop him. If you have not noticed, over on the side of me are my updated rankings as of Friday, so those will continue to be updated, but there are some changes that you can check out over there while I go through the injury report, and the quarterbacks were already up to start the video. So, starting off with Atlanta, Cordero Patterson is questionable with a thigh injury. Moving on to Baltimore, Justice Hill will be out this week officially due to a toe injury, which could keep him out of week 3. It's not expected to be a lengthy absence. I think Gus Edwards is a high floor running back 2 option this week. I have him right behind James Conner, who I think has a worse floor but a higher ceiling than him. As far as OBJ, he is also officially out with an ankle injury. The Colts are the single best wide receiver matchup through 2 weeks in terms of the amount of fantasy points that they have allowed to wide receivers. So I moved Zay Flowers up from a borderline wide receiver 2 to a low-end wide receiver 2 ahead of DJ Moore. You can see him on over there where I have him ranked ahead of Garrett Wilson and Drake London. His ceiling is high this week. And I have Bateman as a low-end flex option in 3 wide receiver leagues. Carolina Panthers, Bryce Young has been ruled out, and he is expected to be out for this week at least, potentially 2 weeks. Andy Dalton will get the start this week, and that should be an upgrade for everyone on this offense. Not that you're going to be starting any of them outside of Miles Sanders. Cincinnati has a Monday Night Football game this week, and of course, we all know the Joe Burrow issue coming up. He did not participate on Thursday, limited participant on Friday. We'll see what happens on Saturday, but it's a really weird situation as far as if they want to sit him, then they pretty much need to sit him for a lengthy period of time. If they want to play him, then they just need to risk never having a 100% Joe Burrow or a 95% healthy Joe Burrow throughout the entirety of the season, and of course risking, I believe, further injury to him. So the backup quarterback, in the case that Joe Burrow is not going, is Jake Browning. He has some athleticism, he is quite accurate, he beat out Trevor Siemian with a strong preseason, and although he's not known for having a rocket of an arm, he can get the ball down the field still. So, I don't think that his play style is going to favor any one of his receivers more than any other of his receivers, and that includes Mixon coming out of the backfield. Just a real quick note on tight end Irv Smith. He turned into a limited participant on Friday. A hamstring injury popped up, so probably doubtful. Going back to Jake Browning, did some scouting on him as far as him coming into the NFL, and then did a little bit of scouting on his preseason just to see that again. And he hit his wide receiver, Josephus. I can never get that pronounced correctly unless I just heard it pronounced correctly by someone else. As far as Josephus, he profiles closest to Jamar Chase as far as the receivers, and he connected with him on a few deep targets this preseason, so that's a good sign for Jamar Chase. And then when it comes to rookie Charlie Jones, he targeted Charlie Jones plenty, and that's your Tyler Boyd replacement. He also hit his running backs coming out of the backfield with plenty of targets while he was in there in the preseason. T. Higgins called him a baller on Friday, so obviously they're on the same page. Moral of the story is, I don't think that this team is in worse hands with him than they were through the first 2 weeks with Joe Burrow, as far as the end results of what you got from Joe Burrow. Obviously, Joe Burrow is better, and there would be a change to my rankings, so this is how my rankings would change. I currently have Jamar Chase ranked a little bit higher, but him and T. Higgins, they would both obviously be downgraded a little bit, but I still think that they are usable depending on your roster. I don't think that you have to absolutely sit them if you're still unsure about the Joe Burrow situation. I think you could take a risk, once again, depending on your roster, and leave them in your lineup, and maybe Joe Burrow plays, maybe he doesn't, maybe they have a big week, maybe they don't. Either way, obviously there's less of a chance of it with out Joe Burrow. As far as Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon goes, they're going to remain unchanged for me in my rankings. Moving on to the Cleveland Browns, Nick Chubb is out for the season. We all know that. Kareem Hunt will play. The question is, how much will he play? And over the next 48 hours will determine how much. Well, obviously, we're still not going to know that answer. And this is just all the more reason, though, to avoid starting your big waiver wire addition in Jerome Ford, if possible. I did end up dropping him a couple of spots in my ranking since his just a volume play and in a bad matchup, and some of that volume is now at threat. Moving on to the Dallas Cowboys, cornerback Trayvon Diggs tore his ACL and he is out for the season. As far as the Detroit Lions go, another defensive injury here. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, CJ Gardner-Johnson went to IR, so that's going to be a huge blow to this defense pretty much for the entirety of the fantasy season. You got guys going up against Detroit. I think you can expect a mildly better defense than last season, which was a very good defense to have players going up against. Amon-Ra St. Brown is questionable this weekend with turf toe. Dan Campbell says that he feels, quote-unquote, pretty good that Amon-Ra will play, and David Montgomery is doubtful with his thigh injury, and they are in an early game, so you'll have time to make shifts, and we'll know more information prior to game time on those players. The Packers are also in the early set of games, so that's helpful because we have Aaron Jones questionable with his hamstring. It's a rough week for running back, so I'm starting him on most rosters if he goes. If he's a go, but the caveat is that he'll be highly limited, then he's going to be a mid-back end RB2. In that event, I'm starting Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, and Alexander Mattison right ahead of him. You'll see those rankings shortly. And Christian Watson, questionable with a hamstring injury. He's the only receiver for Green Bay that I'm looking to play this week as a high-end flex option. Jair Alexander, cornerback for them, is questionable with a back injury. And this just goes for New Orleans receiver Michael Thomas. I would expect him to see Jair the most. He's a risky play for me if Jair plays. However, if not, which was not what I was expecting with my original ranking, so I would move him up in the event that Jair Alexander is not going, then I'm happy to put him in as a high floor, low ceiling kind of option. Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts, Anthony Richardson is officially out with a concussion. Gardner Minshew will be starting. I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing for the other fantasy players on this team. And earlier this week, Evan Hall was placed on IR, and his season is over with a torn meniscus. In case you didn't catch it, running backs are up now. Moving on to Jacksonville, Zay Jones was ruled out with a knee injury, so I moved Christian Kirk up in my rankings. He is in the wide receiver 2 conversation for me now. Kansas City Chiefs, Ricky James was ruled out, MCL, could miss some time per Andy Reid. Kadarius Toney is questionable with a sprained toe, and Isaiah Pacheco is questionable with a hamstring injury. I do believe, personally myself, that Isaiah Pacheco is likely to play, but once again, questionable. Los Angeles Chargers, Austin Eckler is out. Los Angeles Rams, Monday Night Football game. So the Friday report did not come out yet. On Thursday, the first practice of the week for the Rams, Puka Nacua did not participate. I'm not overly concerned about that right now. When we cover Philadelphia, that'll come into play. Miami Dolphins, Salvon Ahmed, doubtful with a groin injury, and it can't hurt to hold on to the backup Devon A-Chain there, or Jeff Wilson Jr. is an IR guy, just kind of reminding you of those guys, good quality guys to have on as, on the back end of your bench, not usable guys. Jalen Waddle is questionable with a concussion this week, and is seeming like he might actually play. I still do not have him ranked, but he's obviously, you play him if he's going. Minnesota Vikings, Cam Akers is not expected to make his debut with the Vikings this week. I never changed my rankings on Madison after that trade happened, so he's still a guy that I'm happy enough to give a go this week. Not super confident in it, but I like the matchup enough. Then New Orleans Saints, Jamal Williams is out with a hamstring injury. Could take a little bit of time, is in quotes here. I'd be okay with dropping him from my roster because don't forget that Kamara will be returning next week, and that comes into play here with Kendre Miller, who has been a full goal all week, so he's good to go. The situation is not clear for this backfield going into this weekend, so to me, he's an emergency-only option. Not a terrible matchup going up against Green Bay, and either way, he's a good stash. And once again, as far as him being a good stash, don't forget, though, his stash potential is limited a little bit by Kamara. Then Foster Moreau is doubtful with an ankle injury, and I'm not changing my ranking on Juwan Johnson, but I am more confident in him now if I am in a position where I'm going to be starting him. New York Giants, Saquon Barkley admitted that he has a high ankle sprain, so it'll be surprising if he's back in 2 weeks, but he was trying to come back for the Thursday night game, so who knows? I would not be opposed to trading him away if I had him on my fantasy football team, especially if he's playing as soon as next week. Then I would be ultra concerned about him just never being efficient this year and or re-injuring himself. New York Jets, Michael Carter, limited participant ×2. Breece Hall, limited participant ×2. Believe, are they a Monday Night Football game, or did I just never get another report for them? Whatever the case, not too concerned about Breece Hall especially, and you're not playing Michael Carter. Philadelphia Eagles, Monday Night Football game. Kenneth Gainwell is not on the injury report anymore as of Friday. I talked about this in the beginning, so without further reports, I'm thinking that Swift gets the first crack at things, which makes Gainwell an emergency option. In my case, how I'm employing him as my emergency option is the fact that I have Puka Nacua going in my flex spot. That game is on Monday as well. So, worst case scenario, I can put Gainwell into my flex if we're still unsure. I don't know which order those games are played, but if we don't know about Puka Nacua or if he is ruled out by chance, then I do have at least a guy like Kenneth Gainwell that I can throw in there and hope for the best. The Bucs are good against the run, though, so I'm not overly excited really about any of the running backs for Philadelphia, though they're on Philadelphia's offense, so the starter's always a go. And Devontae Smith, limited participant twice so far this week, hamstring, thigh injury. Keep an eye on his Saturday report to find out more on that. Hopefully we'll know more by Sunday as well. That would be helpful. I don't know what to tell you about that one. As far as Pittsburgh Steelers go, Deontay Johnson was placed on IR this week. He will be out for a 4 weeks minimum, and since that did not happen prior to the game, I do think that is 4 more games minimum. Then Seahawks, DK Metcalf, questionable with a rib injury earlier this week. Pete Carroll said he may need a couple of days to recoup from the rib injury and, quote-unquote, he's okay. On Friday, he also stated, I would think so about DK playing this weekend when asked about that. Tampa Bay, Chase Edmonds went to IR, Monday Night Football game. Tennessee, early set of games, DeAndre Hopkins, full participant, limited participant, did not participate. That's kind of the wrong direction normally for players, but Tennessee is a little bit weird with how they do things. Him being the veteran and all, like, this might have kind of been the plan. I think that's possible. So he is officially questionable with his ankle injury. He said that he's optimistic that he'll play. Personally, I'm cool with sitting him if you don't want to trust him this week. I do believe that, he still might be limited physically, and Cleveland could have an absolute day against this Tennessee offensive line, which is still very banged up. And they weren't strong when they were healthy either, so not good. Then last up, before we get to my DFS lineup, for Washington Commanders, Logan Thomas is out with a concussion. Cole Turner's the next man up. Desperation play. Curtis Samuel is questionable with an illness, whatever. On to my DFS lineup, and this is definitely a big tournament play type of lineup. No need to use this if you're in a very small tournament or just even a smaller tournament. I think it's a little too risky for that. So I have CJ Stroud at $5,300 for my quarterback. I paired him up with Nico Collins at $5,300. So my other wide receivers are Jordan Addison and Stephon Diggs. My flex is running back, so we'll get to that. So Stephon Diggs at $8,100, Jordan Addison at $5,500. Then for my running backs, I have Kenneth Walker at running back at $6,200. Tank Bigsby at $4,700. Now here's my concern with Tank Bigsby in this lineup, but I'm going to keep it this way because it could still work out just fine. But, the hope would be that Jacksonville goes up by quite a bit and Tank Bigsby gets at least a touchdown, but maybe even 2 in this game somehow. So, and gets some usage late in the game due to them just having such a big lead. However, with having CJ Stroud and Nico Collins on the opposite side, I'm kind of banking on them scoring, obviously, and having a big day, but I think that could still happen with Jacksonville taking an early lead and them kind of coming back in the fourth quarter, and maybe they would still use Tank Bigsby to try to run out the clock. Possible. My other running back in the flex, I have Tony Pollard at $8K, and for my tight end, I have Kyle Pitts, my almost love him of the week, for $3,900, so going for it there. And for my defense, I went cheap with the Jets going up against New England at $2,800. Felt like one of those deals that I couldn't pass up on there because there's always a chance, in that matchup. That could be a big week for the Jets. So that's my lineup. I have $200 left over in it. Thank you very, very much. Please like, comment, subscribe if you made it this far. Hope we went through this quick enough. Peace out.